The gravel crunched under the tires as the old sedan rolled to a stop. Henry Grayson, 70 years old, sat in the passenger seat, his gnarled hands folded tightly in his lap. The free clinic loomed a heat of squat. Gray building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that read Mercy Health. The air inside the car was heavy, thick with unspoken words. His daughter-in-law, Sarah, gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles pale. She didn't look at him. "Here we are, Henry," she said. Her voice clipped. "Professional. They'll take care of you. It's for the best." Henry's lips pressed into a thin line. He wanted to argue, to tell her he wasn't some burden to be shuffled off. But the ache in his chest and the rattle in his lungs told a different story. The doctors had been clear, his heart was failing. His savings were gone. And the hospital bills from his last visit had wiped out what little he'd scraped together over decades of working as a mechanic. Sarah, with her nurse's salary and a family to feed, couldn't afford to keep him in their cramped apartment. He understood. But understanding didn't dull the sting. He opened the car door. His movement slow, deliberate. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp leaves and exhaust. He glanced at Sarah, hoping for a flicker of warmth. But her eyes were fixed on the dashboard, her jaw tight. She was a good woman. He knew worked long hours at the hospital, cared for his grandkids with fierce love, but something had shifted between them since his son, her husband, died 2 years ago. Grief had a way of carving distance where closeness once stood. "Don't worry about me," Henry said, his voice gravelly but steady. "I'll manage." Sarah nodded, still not meeting his gaze. "I'll check on you later." "Okay. Just get settled." He stepped out, his boots scuffing the gravel. The car door shut with a thud, and before he could say another word, Sarah pulled away, the sedan's taillights fading into the dusk. He stood there, alone, the weight of his duffel bag pulling at his shoulder. The clinic's doors beckoned, promising shelter but little else. Henry squared his shoulders, ignoring the pain radiating from his chest. He'd faced worse wars. Loss. Years of grinding work. This was just another fight. Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and despair. The waiting room was a patchwork of cracked chairs and faded posters about flu shots and free screenings. A young woman at the front desk, barely out of her teens, glanced up from her phone. "Name?" she asked, her tone flat. "Henry Grayson," he said, setting his bag down. "I'm staying here for a bit." She nodded, barely listening, and handed him a clipboard with forms. "Fill these out. Room's down the hall. Third door on the right." Henry took the clipboard, his fingers brushing the cheap plastic pin tethered to it. He shuffled to a chair, the forms blurring in his vision. Questions about insurance, none. Emergency contacts, none. Medical history, too long to fit in the tiny boxes. He scribbled what he could, his handwriting shaky but legible. The other patients in the waiting room, a mother with a coughing child. An elderly woman muttering to herself, kept to their own worlds. No one looked at him. No one cared. That night, in a narrow cot with a thin mattress, Henry lay awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling. The clinic was quiet, save for the hum of a vending machine and the occasional cough from another room. His thoughts drifted to his past, the garage he'd owned, the smell of motor oil, the pride of fixing something broken. He'd built a life with his hands, but now those hands trembled. Useless. He thought of Sarah, too, and the way she'd driven off without a backward glance. He didn't blame her. Not really. But the hurt lingered, sharp as a blade. The next morning, a volunteer doctor, a harried man with glasses perched on his nose, checked Henry's vitals. "Your heart's not great, mister," Grayson, he said, scribbling notes. We can manage the symptoms here, but you need a specialist. And meds. Expensive ones. Henry nodded, already knowing the answer to his next question. Any way to get those meds without? You know, selling my soul. The doctor sighed, his eyes kind but tired. We'll do what we can. There's a charity program, but it's a long shot. Budget's tight. Henry leaned back, the cot creaking under him. A long shot. His whole life had been a series of long shots surviving the war. Raising a son on a mechanic's pay. Burying that son before his time. He'd always found a way. He'd find one now. Days blurred into weeks. The clinic became his world, bland meals. Endless forms. And the slow drip of hope eroding. But Henry wasn't one to sit idle. He started helping around the clinic, fixing a wobbly chair, tightening a leaky faucet, even tinkering with the ancient heater in the lounge. The staff noticed, their guarded smiles softening. The young receptionist, Mia, started calling him Pops, her teasing laced with affection. For the first time in months, Henry felt a spark of purpose. One evening, as he tightened a loose screw on a cabinet, Mia leaned against the counter, watching. You're wasted here, Pops, she said. Ever think about doing something big again? Like, I dunno, running your own shop? Henry chuckled, the sound rough but genuine. Those days are gone, kid. Besides, who's gonna hire a 70-year-old with a bum ticker? Mia shrugged, her eyes bright. You'd be surprised. People still need fixing. Machines. Lives. Whatever. Her words stuck with him, burrowing deep. That night, as he lay in his cot, an idea began to form, a wild, impossible idea. He'd lost everything, his home, his health, his family's warmth. But he hadn't lost his fight. And maybe, just maybe, he could turn this place, these people, into something more. Henry's days at the clinic settled into a rhythm, each one a small rebellion against despair. He woke early, before the sun breached the horizon, and moved through the quiet halls, fixing what he could. A squeaky door hinge, a flickering light, a jammed window. These were small victories, but they tethered him to the man he used to be. The staff began to rely on him, their gratitude unspoken but clear in the way they left coffee by his cot or slipped an extra roll onto his tray at dinner. Mia, the receptionist, became his unlikely ally. She was 22, with a sharp wit and a guarded heart, working at the clinic to pay for community college. She'd grown up in foster care, she told him one slow afternoon, her voice casual but her eyes distant. Nobody hands you anything, she said, tossing a pen in the air and catching it. You gotta take it. Henry nodded, recognizing the fire in her. It was the same fire he'd felt at her age, when the world was a challenge to be conquered. You're right, he said. But sometimes you gotta give, too. Makes the taking mean something. She smirked, but her expression softened. From then on, she sought him out, sharing stories of her classes or her dreams of becoming a social worker. Henry listened, offering gruff advice or a quiet nod. He didn't say it aloud, but she reminded him of his son, fierce, stubborn, full of potential. One morning, as Henry tightened a loose bolt on a wheelchair, Mia dropped a newspaper on the counter. Check this out, Pops, she said, tapping an article. Some billionaire bought a hospital downtown, turned it into a fancy research center. But he doesn't even know what it's like to need a place like this. Henry skimmed the article, his jaw tightening. The hospital in question was Street Mary's, where Sarah worked. He'd been there once, years ago, when his son was still alive. It was a good place, overworked, underfunded, but good. The idea of it being turned into some gleaming lab for the rich twisted something in his gut. Money changes things, he said, folding the paper. Not always for the better. Mia snorted. Tell me about it. This place is barely holding on. If we don't get funding soon, they're going to shut us down. Henry froze, the wrench still in his hand. Shut down. When? Next year. Maybe. Mia said, her voice low. Grants are drying up. Nobody cares about free clinics when there's profit to be made. The words hit him like a punch. This clinic, with its cracked walls and overworked staff, was the only thing keeping him and dozens of others from the street. He thought of the patients he'd met, the single mother who came for her son's asthma treatments, the veteran with shaking hands who never spoke, the elderly woman who sang hymns to herself in the waiting room. They weren't just names on a clipboard. They were people, like him, clinging to what little dignity they had left. That night, Henry couldn't sleep. Mia's words echoed in his head, mingling with memories of his old life. He'd never had much, but he'd always had his hands, his mind, his will to keep going. An idea, reckless and bold, took root. What if he could save the clinic? Not just fix its pipes or chairs, but save it entirely. He had no money, no connections, no power. But he had time, and he had fight. The next day, he cornered Mia during her break. You know anybody who's good with numbers? Like business stuff. She raised an eyebrow, popping a piece of gum. Why? You planning to rob a bank? He chuckled, shaking his head. Nah. Just got an idea. Need someone who can tell me if it's crazy. Mia grinned. I know a guy. My professor. Dr. Lin. He's all about startups and nonprofits. Want me to set something up? Henry nodded, his heart pounding. It was a long shot, but long shots were his specialty. A week later, Dr. Lin, a wiry man with a quick smile and a laptop full of spreadsheets, met Henry at the clinic's tiny cafeteria. Henry laid out his idea, turned the clinic into a community-owned health center, funded by local businesses and small donations. No billionaires. No corporate takeovers, just people helping people. Dr. Lin listened, his fingers tapping the table. It's ambitious. Dr. Lin said, pushing his glasses up. But doable. You'd need a business plan, a board, and a lot of hustle. You ever run anything like this? Henry shook his head. Ran a garage for 30 years. Fixed cars. Not systems. But I learned fast. Dr. Lin smiled. That's half the battle. Let's start small. Get some local support. Build a case. You got a name for this thing? Henry thought for a moment, his mind flashing to the neon sign outside. Mercy Health Collective. He said, keep it simple. Keep it real. Over the next few weeks, Henry threw himself into the plan. He and Mia spent evenings drafting letters to local businesses, outlining the clinic's needs and their vision. Dr. Lin helped crunch numbers, showing Henry how to structure a nonprofit. It was grueling. His body ached. His heart struggled, but every step felt like defiance against the world that had counted him out. One afternoon, as Henry stuffed envelopes, Sarah called. Her voice was hesitant, almost shy. Just checking in. Henry, you okay? He paused, the receiver heavy in his hand. He wanted to tell her about the plan, about the spark in his chest, but the distance between them held him back. I'm fine, he said, keeping busy. Good, she said, and he could hear the relief in her voice. I'll stop by soon. Okay. Yeah, he said, but as he hung up, he wondered if she meant it. For now, he had work to do. Henry's plan for the Mercy Health Collective gained traction faster than he'd expected. Mia's energy was infectious. She roped in classmates to spread the word, designed flyers on her laptop, and even set up a crowdfunding page. Local businesses, skeptical at first, started to listen when Henry showed up in person, his weathered face and steady voice carrying a quiet authority. He wasn't begging. He was offering them a chance to be part of something bigger. A hardware store donated supplies for clinic repairs. A diner down the street pledged meals for staff on weekends. Even the grumpy pharmacist across town, Mr. Patel, agreed to discount meds for clinic patients. Each win, however small, fueled Henry's resolve. His heart still ached. His breaths still came shallow. But purpose dulled the pain. Dr. Lynn became their anchor, guiding Henry through the maze of legal forms and grant applications. "You're a natural," he told Henry one evening, reviewing a pitch letter Henry had written. "You've got the grit. People trust grit." Henry shrugged, embarrassed. "Just don't want to see this place die." But not everyone was on board. At a community meeting, a slick developer named Carl Vance stood up, his suit crisp and his smile sharper. "This is a nice story, Mr. Grayson," he said, his tone patronizing. "But the land this clinic's on, prime real estate. Investors want condos, not charity cases." The room murmured, some nodding in agreement. Henry felt his hands clench. "This clinic's saved lives," he said, his voice low but firm. "You can't put a price on that." Vance smirked. "Everything's got a price." The meeting ended in a stalemate. But Vance's words lingered. Henry knew the clinic was vulnerable. Its lease was month to month, and the city council was hungry for tax revenue. If they didn't secure funding soon, the developers would win. That night, Henry sat with Mia, poring over their crowdfunding numbers. They'd raised $10. 000, not bad, but nowhere near enough to buy the building or sustain operations. "We need a big fish," Mia said, chewing her pen. "Someone with deep pockets who believes in this." Henry's thoughts drifted to Sarah. She worked at St. Mary's, surrounded by doctors and administrators who might know philanthropists. He hesitated, the memory of her dropping him off still raw. But this wasn't about pride. It was about the clinic. He called her the next day. "Sarah, I need a favor," he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "You know anybody at the hospital who might back a community project?" There was a long pause. "What kind of project?" she asked, cautious. He told her everything: the Mercy Health Collective, the crowdfunding, the threat of developers. When he finished, Sarah was quiet for so long he thought she'd hung up. Then she said, "I'll ask around. No promises." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the next week, Sarah came through, connecting Henry with a retired surgeon, Dr. Eleanor Hayes, who'd spent decades at St. Mary's. Dr. Hayes was in her 60s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with a reputation for championing underfunded causes. She met Henry at the clinic, her gaze sweeping over the cracked walls and outdated equipment. "This place is a mess," she said bluntly, "but it's got heart. What's your plan?" Henry laid it out: a self-sustaining clinic, owned by the community, serving those who'd been left behind. Dr. Hayes listened, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she leaned back, tapping her pen. "I know some people," she said. "Old colleagues. A few donors. I'll make calls. But you'd better deliver." "Henry, I don't back losers." He nodded, a spark of hope igniting. "I don't plan to lose." With Dr. Hayes' help, The campaign gained momentum. A local news station ran a story on the clinic, featuring Henry and Mia. Donations poured in, not millions, but enough to keep the lights on. Volunteers showed up to paint walls, fix plumbing, even teach health workshops. The clinic started to feel alive again, buzzing with possibility. But the developers weren't done. One morning, a letter arrived, an eviction notice. The landlord, swayed by Vance's promises of profit, was giving the clinic 30 days to vacate. Henry stared at the paper, his heart pounding harder than it had in weeks. Mia, reading over his shoulder, cursed under her breath. "We're not done yet," Henry said, folding the letter. "We've got a month. Let's make it count." They doubled down. Mia organized a rally outside the clinic, drawing a crowd of patients, staff, and neighbors. Henry spoke, his voice rough but steady, telling stories of the people the clinic had saved. The crowd cheered, their signs reading "Save Mercy Health" and "People over Profit." For the first time, Henry felt like he wasn't alone in this fight. Sarah showed up at the rally, standing at the back, her arms crossed. When Henry caught her eye, she gave a small nod, her expression unreadable. He didn't know what it meant, but it was enough to keep him going. The eviction notice hung over the clinic like a storm cloud, but Henry refused to let it break him. He and Mia worked late into the night, drafting proposals, calling donors, and planning a final push to save the building. Dr. Hayes proved invaluable, leveraging her network to secure meetings with city officials and philanthropists. One donor, a quiet woman named Mrs. Carter, who'd lost her son to addiction, pledged $50,000 after hearing Henry speak at a fundraiser. It was a lifeline, but still not enough to buy the property outright. Henry's health was slipping. The stress, the long hours, the constant ache in his chest, it was taking a toll. The clinic's doctor prescribed new meds, but they were hard to come by, and Henry often skipped doses to save them for others. He didn't tell Mia or Dr. Hayes. They had enough to worry about. One evening, as Henry sorted through donor lists, Sarah appeared at the clinic. She looked tired, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled, but her eyes held a determination he hadn't seen in months. "I talked to some people at Street Mary's," she said, setting a folder on the counter. "They're interested, but they want a real plan. Henry, numbers, timelines, proof you can pull this off." He took the folder, his fingers trembling slightly. "Thank you, Sarah. It means a lot." She hesitated, then sat across from him. "I didn't expect you to do all this," she said, her voice soft. "When I dropped you off, I thought it was the end. For you. For us." Henry looked at her, the weight of her words settling in. "You did what you had to," he said. "I don't hold it against you." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked it away. "I should have done more. I was scared. Henry, after Mark died, I didn't know how to keep it all together." He reached out, his hand resting on hers. "You're here now? That's what matters." For the first time in years, they really talked. About Mark. About the kids. About the guilt they both carried. It wasn't a fix, but it was a start. When Sarah left, promising to push harder at Street Mary's, Henry felt a warmth he hadn't known in a long time. The next week was a blur of meetings and rallies. Dr. Hayes introduced Henry to a group of doctors from Street Mary's who were willing to volunteer at the clinic if it could stay open. The city council, under pressure from the community, agreed to delay the eviction by 2 weeks. It was a small victory, but it bought time. Then came the breakthrough. Mrs. Carter, the donor, Called with news, she'd convinced a friend, a retired tech mogul named Alan Roth, to tour the clinic. Roth arrived in a nondescript sedan, his casual jeans and sweater belying his wealth. He listened as Henry walked him through the clinic, pointing out the outdated equipment, the overcrowded rooms, the patients who depended on it. Roth asked sharp questions about budgets, staff, long-term goals, but his eyes softened when he met the patients. "You're not just saving a building," Roth said as they finished the tour. "You're saving a community." Henry nodded. "That's the idea." Roth was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'll fund the purchase of the building. On one condition, you run it. Not just as a handyman, as the leader." Henry's breath caught. He'd never seen himself as a leader, just a man trying to do right. But the fire in his chest, the one that had kept him going through war and loss and heartbreak, flared brighter. "I'm in," he said. With Roth's backing, the Mercy Health Collective bought the clinic's building just days before the eviction deadline. The staff celebrated with pizza and soda in the lounge, their laughter echoing through the halls. Mia hugged Henry so hard he thought his ribs might crack. "Told you, Pops," she whispered. "You're not wasted here." But Henry wasn't done. Saving the clinic was only the beginning. He had a bigger idea, one so audacious it scared him. He kept it to himself for now, letting the victory sink in. As he looked around at the faces of the staff and patients, he felt a purpose he hadn't known in years. This was his fight, and he was winning. With the clinic's building secured, Henry's vision for the Mercy Health Collective expanded. He didn't just want a free clinic. He wanted a model for community healthcare, one that could inspire others. He spent hours with Dr. Lynn, sketching out plans to expand services, a mobile clinic for rural areas, partnerships with local schools for health education, even a training program for young people like Mia to become nurses or social workers. The ideas poured out, fueled by decades of pent-up determination. But the bigger the dream, the bigger the obstacles. The clinic's operating costs were still a struggle, and Henry's health was a ticking clock. He pushed through, ignoring the dizzy spells and the doctor's warnings. There was too much at stake. One afternoon, Dr. Hayes called with news. "Street. Mary's is up for sale," she said. The research center deal fell through. The board's looking for buyers, but they want someone who'll keep it a hospital, not turn it into condos. Henry's heart raced, and not just from his condition. Street. Mary's was where Sarah worked, where his son had been treated before he passed. It was a cornerstone of the city's healthcare, serving thousands. The thought of it closing or worse, becoming another luxury development, was unbearable. And then it hit him. What if the Mercy Health Collective didn't just save the clinic? What if they bought Street Mary's? The idea was insane. The clinic was barely solvent, and Street Mary's was worth millions. But Henry had never backed down from a long shot. He called a meeting with Mia, Dr. Lynn, Dr. Hayes, and Alan Roth. When he laid out his plan, the room went silent. "You want to buy a hospital?" Mia said, her eyes wide. "Pops, we just got this place out of the red." "I know it's crazy," Henry said, leaning forward. "But think about it. We could make Street Mary's a partner to the clinic's same mission. Bigger scale. Affordable care. No one turned away. We've got the community behind us. We've got Roth's backing. We can do this." Dr. Hayes raised an eyebrow. "You'd need a lot more than Roth's money. And a board. Staff. Accreditation, it's a mountain." "Then we climb it," Henry said, his voice unwavering. Roth, who'd been quiet, leaned forward. "I like the audacity," he said. "But you'd need a coalition. Other nonprofits. Community groups. maybe even government grants. I can open doors, but you'll have to walk through them. Over the next month, Henry became a man possessed. He met with every contact he had: business owners, city officials, even patients who'd become advocates. Mia built a website for the campaign, dubbed Save Street Mary's, and it went viral in the community. Donations came in, small but steady, from people who'd been treated at the hospital or knew someone who had. Sarah was skeptical when Henry told her the plan. "You're going to buy my hospital," she said, half laughing, half incredulous. "Henry, you're out of your mind." "Maybe," he said, grinning, "but I've got a good team. And I've got you." She shook her head, but a smile tugged at her lips. "I'll talk to the staff. Some of them might help." With Sarah's help, the hospital's nurses and doctors rallied behind the cause. They organized fundraisers, spoke at community events, and even lobbied the city council. The momentum was undeniable. But so was the deadline. The hospital's board was reviewing offers in 3 weeks. Henry worked himself to the bone, his health deteriorating with every late night. One evening, as he reviewed budgets with Dr. Lynn, he collapsed, his vision blurring. He woke in a clinic bed, Mia at his side, her face pale. "You scared the hell out of us, Pops," she said, her voice shaking. "You gotta slow down." "Can't," he rasped. "Not yet." She grabbed his hand, her grip fierce. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about the clinic or the hospital. It's about you. We need you." Her words hit harder than any eviction notice. For the first time, Henry realized how much he'd come to mean to the people around him. He promised to rest, but only after the deal was done. The final push to buy Street Mary's was a marathon of hope and grit. Henry, despite his promise to rest, couldn't stay away. He met with the hospital board, his voice steady as he presented the Mercy Health Collective's vision: a hospital and clinic working together, serving the community, prioritizing care over profit. Roth pledged a significant chunk of the funds, and the community's donations hundreds of small contributions from patients, families, and local businesses closed the gap. The developers, led by Carl Vance, fought hard, offering a higher bid. But the board, swayed by the community's outcry and the collective's detailed plan, voted in Henry's favor. On the day the sale was finalized, the clinic staff and volunteers gathered outside Street Mary's, cheering as Henry signed the papers. Mia hugged him, tears in her eyes. "We did it, Pops," she said. Henry nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. His chest ached. But it wasn't just his heart, it was pride, relief, a sense of victory he hadn't felt in decades. That evening, Sarah found him in the hospital's lobby, now officially part of the Mercy Health Collective. She was in her scrubs, her eyes red. "I can't believe you pulled this off," she said, her voice breaking. "When I dropped you at that clinic, I thought I was abandoning you." Henry shook his head, his own eyes stinging. "You didn't abandon me, Sarah. You gave me a chance to fight." She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him. They stood there, holding each other, the weight of years lifting. The hospital buzzed around them, nurses rushing to patients, doctors reviewing charts, but for that moment, it was just them, rebuilding what grief had torn apart. In the months that followed, the Mercy Health Collective transformed Street Mary's. They kept costs low, expanded free services, and hired Mia as a community outreach coordinator after she graduated. Henry, though officially the director, stayed hands-on, fixing equipment and mentoring young volunteers. His health was fragile, but he took his meds, paced himself, and let others carry some of the load. One quiet evening, as Henry sat in the hospital's garden, Sarah joined him. She handed him a photo of his grandkids, smiling at a clinic health fair. "They're proud of you," she said. "We all are." Henry looked at the photo, his throat tight. He'd started this journey alone, dropped at a free clinic with nothing but a duffel bag. Now, he was surrounded by a community he'd helped build, a legacy that would outlive him. "I'm proud of us," he said, his voice soft but sure. And as the sun set, casting golden light over the hospital he'd fought for, Henry Grayson knew he'd found his purpose. Not in fixing cars or machines, but in fixing lives one heart, one home, one community at a time.